All right, hello, this is John Davis. I'm here with Action Coach Business Coaching, and today I'm meeting with Ed Caldwell of Professional Learning Services. Ed and I were just talking. We've got a lot of commonality in our background. So, Ed, maybe just quickly, kind of introduce yourself, what you do, and what your company does.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate this. I am Productive Learning Systems. It used to be a corporate organizational development consultancy, a small boutique shop here in Atlanta. And I say boutique because we would customize our programs for each of the organizations that we used to work for. And we made a pivot back around 2014 and got out of the...
Back before it was popular to pivot.
Pardon me?
Back before everybody was popular to pivot, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes. And actually, the story you told me is you were a little bit of ahead of the quiet quitting revolution that has happened.
Yeah.
And
I was a great resigner. I didn't hang around to do quiet quitting. I just resigned.
Well, then great. Yeah, that's the management's alternative to quiet quitting.
Yep.
Which again, both of those terms are not anything new. It's just a new phrase over an old set of behaviors for both the employees and the managers. But anyway, so Productive Learning Systems is here in Metro Atlanta, and we pivoted to have more of a direct impact on the people that really actually wanted to show up and grow themselves. And that's why I left that type of consulting and training delivery system that we used to provide, and really got more into executive and management and leadership development.
Okay, all right. So we've been doing that about 8 years. So who's kind of your best customer, or we talked about it briefly a moment ago, just kind of a target audience in terms of size of the company, location, industries. Who is it that you're trying to meet?
I'll meet anybody that wants to grow, actually, to be honest with you. And when I started off, I started off really with the small business people, but I found that it was kind of tough for them to invest in the type of both consulting, one-on-one coaching, as well as training for their people that I was offering, and shifted my focus more to larger organizations. And it doesn't have to be super large. As a matter of fact, some of my clients are large global evacuees coming from some of the big organizations and wanting to jump into startups. And I have a handful of clients that have made that kind of a jump where they have more responsibility, more direct impact in terms of how they are leading today. So it's really not a one size fits all. Typically, I am working with companies that are mid to large size, both global as well as national. And obviously, they're the ones whose corporate profits are much deeper and willing to pay. And one of the great things that my client companies seem to be bringing is they really do want to see their overall management shift to more of a mindset of leader as coach, where they really want to shift that mindset from being a traditional command and control manager, which just doesn't work in today's workforce, to being the person that their people feel comfortable in terms of sitting down and having their one-on-ones that are performance oriented, number one, but number two, that they're facilitating their people's thinking in terms of how to be better problem solvers themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, what you just said. I understand, the larger size, because you're looking for somebody who is willing to invest in what you provide. And there's people with small. It sounds like you have people who are, you said, recent evacuees. I think you said who want more impact, who can see a better way. And it sounds a little bit people that are I don't want to say differently. They don't think differently, but they're willing to challenge the status quo of how it's been done, right? As opposed to the age-old top-down mantra of management, much more of an integrated approach to leadership, which is probably more early adopter for most larger businesses, I would say. Obviously, the last few years has increased the adoption rate with the current issues with unemployment, but still not the predominant thinking and approach to most larger businesses. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
any of those organizations whose culture is just stale. And by stale, I mean that they're organizations that really haven't thought through who they really want to be as opposed to, just performing for the bottom line shareholder quarterly reporting.
Right. Or know how to
Those,
do it. Or they know they
those
want to be different, but they don't know how to get there.
I'm not so even sure whether they even want to get there. Right. So yeah, I am one of these. I've been a corporate renegade for a long time myself. And again, the big traditional type of command and control organizations was never my cup of tea, and it has just spread like wildfire throughout the high performing workforce that we have today. So many of my clients are so brilliant, but they want to have an impact.
The corporations or the individuals?
The individuals.
Okay,
The
so the people,
corporations, the large corporations, what I'm saying is like, they're beholden to Wall Street.
who comes to you for, or who do you have to approach? You have to approach the corporation, or do you have to approach, is it the executive that
Both.
says, okay,
Yeah. Most of my new clients come by word of mouth.
okay, probably more individual based.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. So it was me a couple of years ago, right, saying, hey, I want to, things need to change. I'm not sure how to change it from within my seat, because a lot of folks don't realize that when you get into upper management, the assumption is your ability to influence, your ability to control your situation is not as big as people think it is. Your lever to make change is not as big as you think it is until you learn how to use it. And it's, people need to learn how to execute and initiate change in a much bigger organization to a bigger way. So
yeah, the couple of important words that you said in that, and that is one of the fortes of what I do with my clients actually is help them to think strategically so that they can make more effective strategic plans. And most company strategic plans fail because they have failed to think strategically, especially around the area that you just mentioned. First of all, where are we going? What's the direction? What's that vision? And how are we going to get there in terms of the execution part? Or they forget about, oh, gee, to execute, we really need to have to think through the mindset of the implementers themselves. What are their resistances and what can we do to overcome them?
or we have to communicate it, period.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes, we we don't communicate it effectively to get people on board. People aren't on board. Well, you didn't ask them to get on board. You didn't tell them where the boat was going.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to go here. This is why the boat's going here, and this is why it's important for you to get there. Let's go.
The whole idea of a vision and mission, most people that have had any experience in corporate America, oh yeah, that's all the stuff that's on the walls. Okay, well, can you tell me what your company's vision is? And they may pull out a card out of their pocket. That means that the work has not been completed. It's not resonant in people's minds.
Yeah, I literally just this morning worked on that with a client, restating how we're going to get the vision mission to his small team. But I have been in charge of trying to get that executed at a large level in our large company. And interesting, because by the time the vision and mission and the value proposition are defined, I found the executive leadership was fatigued with the topic and wanted it to be done. I'm not trying to criticize any of my coworkers out there that are listening to it. to not finish that it's like running a marathon, but the last 100 yards of the marathon is right uphill. And that's the most important piece.
Absolutely.
Right? You just don't get to the top of that hill unless you run there. Otherwise, the other 25.9 miles are complete waste of time. And that's the hardest work, is getting, and it's also, it's the hardest work emotionally, and it's the hardest financially for many businesses to get it out to the thousands of employees in the business. So yeah, as I said, I knew we could talk for a while.
Back in I think it was 2009 or 10, American Management Association did a long-term deep research on major changes that companies were doing, especially mergers and acquisitions, and they found that 95% or more of those companies never achieved the outcomes that were promised to their shareholders on the front end. And when they did the research, they saw that, okay, these are all very disparate types of organizations with very disparate management styles and all that. But they said there was one thing that they had in common, and that was failure to execute. Oh, we're real good in coming up with these wonderful flowering statements and all that. But what do they really mean when it gets boiled down to day-to-day operations, and the rank and file just goes, huh? How much did you guys spend to come up with that? We have no idea what you're talking about. Nor do they understand people's natural confusion and or resistance to change. And they don't know how to navigate it because they haven't thought through the people side of what they're trying to create.
So I have to imagine, I mean, just the last few years, because of what's going on with unemployment and the back to work and culture, I'd have to imagine you're finding a lot more opportunities. And I'm just curious, how have you had to adjust your business? Because I feel like this topic is more top of mind, and probably this idea would resonate with more people than ever before. So if you had to make changes to your business, go with that, or am I wrong in that assumption?
With COVID, I mean, the whole world has changed with COVID. We all know that. And in the early days, the freaky deaky, oh my God. And for me and my business, it was actually quite a silver lining for a number of reasons. But more importantly, is it brought people home, literally, to understand that there is more to life than just work, right?
Yep.
And which led into the great resignation that you and I were talking about before. And the number of people that have turned over in the workforce, just unbelievable. The unfortunate thing is that they just escaped one jailhouse to go to another jailhouse because they didn't spend the time to do the thinking. Well, that actually brought a lot of people to me in terms of this flux and this change. People that really do want to have their careers give them more of life satisfaction in general. And so, when I'm first onboarding somebody, one of the things we talk about is we're going to work from the inside out. And one of the ways that we're going to be doing that is like really identify what is it that you really love, what ignites you, so that you will always have the energy that is required to perform at your peak. Because let's face it, there are times where you got to put your nose to the grindstone, but if you do it day in and day out, month after month, that's just a burnout life. Mm-hmm. And so, we'll walk you through a number of perceptions of how you used to think you would organize your life for your quote career. And we're going to, throw it up in the air and have it fall back down on the ground and see how you piece it back together in a way that you're going to find more sustaining over the long haul.
Okay.
Or in other words, we're really talking about personal core values. And so don't jump ship of your company, until you find one that the culture is right for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of different variables having been through it. The culture is a big one. There's a lot of other, there's economic and, other lifestyle choices for sure. It's interesting too, you talked about energy, right? I think for folks in those situations, to stick to the values, and they're trying to initiate change from within, it takes a huge amount of, it takes that, your core values and that commitment. But you talked about the fatigue. I forget your exact word, but they have to have a conviction that gives them enough energy to drive that change,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon their level in the organization. They're the president, that's one thing, right? If they report to the president, it's another level. And once you get another layer removed from the president or the chief executive officer, they may feel completely overwhelmed or inadequate to tackle, to be a change driver, I would say.
Right. And so
externally within the organization versus themselves, but even in themselves.
if there's not a good cultural fit, you're going to have tremendous motivation problems for yourself. And I've always believed in the plumber's effect in organizations, that all the crap rolls downhill.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's really important for leaders of other people to stand on these core values and operate that the core values becomes the culture of the organization, right? And that's the glue that keeps people together and keeps them performing well. And if it's not consistent from what they see from the top, then you're going to have people that find themselves stuck in their career, and you're going to have the quiet quitting that has recently been labeled. But that's been around for years.
Yeah, but I don't think people spoke about it the same way.
Correct.
I have a client who he's in a trades industry, right? Talking about values and mission statements is the last thing he ever wants to talk about. Right. But he's got an employee issue. And he's had this employee issue for a while. And then we went through an exercise of defining his values. I had to do it quite quickly or I was going to lose his focus. I had to do it in a matter of minutes to illustrate the point, as opposed to a much deeper thought exercise. But once we went through it and I was able to help him figure out his values, his company values, it then gave him a lens to evaluate that employee.
Yep.
And while we as individuals can change, right? I'm sure you've heard of the identity iceberg, and there's ways to change who you are. It takes a lot of effort and motivation. And in this individual's case, he only fit about half of the values. And I said, is this person ever going? And so it goes both ways, right? I'm not saying it's used as a screen or a filter, but it kind of is for hiring people and keeping people. Like, is this person ever going to make it long term in your business? No. If they only fit half of your values, no. let's make it easier for everybody and move on.
That's
and it
right,
wasn't until he did that exercise he could understand that from the owner's seat. And it works the same way for the employee's seat.
Absolutely. It gives a common baseline of understanding in terms of what I like to call the rules of engagement, right? And what am I selling into the marketplace? If it's not a good match, then you shouldn't be there. So again, going back to the quiet quitting thing, again, the research I read through Harvard Business Review, like it's my daily newspaper, and the statistics on people that have buyer's remorse in making the transitions that they've made over the last couple of years, simply because they just wanted to change of scenery, right? And they didn't go through this deeper set of what's really important to me. What do I really want in my career, and how is that a good match for whoever's giving me an offer?
So let me switch gears a little bit. As things have evolved in the last few years in your industry, is there anything that's happened recently that you wish you had done sooner, that maybe the whole pandemic and the reaction to the pandemic has brought about, that you think maybe you could have done differently or sooner?
Well, probably in terms of tending to the sidelines of business. And why this, for me at this point, what I'm doing when I refer to sidelines, I'm really talking about the marketing aspect of it. That's really
your business.
Yeah, in terms but the funny thing about it is, in terms of my career for over decades, is, well, marketing was not always my forte, number one. And that was really a good thing, because for most of the years in business, I really didn't have to worry about it. So, as I said, with what happened with COVID, it was actually a silver lining for me. And so now there's a little bit of a disconnect between various websites and my LinkedIn profile and stuff like that. That's the only thing that I can think of that I would have liked to have had it more consistently gelled earlier.
Yeah, that's something that we talk to people about is, you talk about setting your vision and your mission. Um,
Branding.
that is inclusive of the marketing component as well, right?
Absolutely.
Because that way you make sure that your marketing always reflects your vision and your mission, or if it's changed, you change with it. And also, I think the other piece, for a lot of people, you and I, in the world that we're in, there's a lot of folks who start the businesses to work independently for various reasons. And that doesn't mean you have to work alone. And it doesn't mean it has to just be you. And the marketing is a component of the business building for sure. Right. And referrals are great. They're easy. They're cheap. They're effective. And it can make a lot of people a lot of money and very comfortable for many years. But marketing can be a component of that allows you to have more effect in the long run.
Absolutely. One of my current clients, as a matter of fact, again, one of the corporate evacuees from major tech companies, got into marketing for startups, very small startups, only to be very disappointed in terms of how that particular niche in NFTs has changed, and is now in an area where, okay, I'm going to do this differently, and I'm just going to build a team around me, right? As people are going through this process and they're clear about how they want to work, what's most important to them, it helps them redesign whatever it is that they want to do in terms of building their own small business, or maybe even jumping into a smaller business that's going through a couple of rounds of seed funding.
Right. Yeah, I think the other component is what makes you unique, right? How you take what makes you unique. It helps you define who your target is, so as you know who to market to. Right. Because there's probably some component. We each have some unique experiences and skills that we can bring to the table that will help us attack a certain market opportunity differently, which will impact our marketing and could allow scaling faster than we imagined.
That's really well put, and is the biggest challenge when people are actually trying to leave their big corporate job to go into something else, or some of my people that are in small businesses. And again, it goes around what we've been talking about so far. That's part of your brand, right? I mean, the consistency of your brand image. How do you make that happen? I'm much better in helping my clients do that than I'm in helping myself.
Yeah. Well, that's common, right?
Yeah. Shoemaker's son has no shoes.
Has been happening for centuries that people have that. So what do you see is next for your business?
What I see is next for my business is to really continue to nurture my current load of clients, which is I'm completely full at this point, and morph them into other learning programs and possibly going into longer term engagements. And one of the things I've always wanted to do in my work is to really help people build these conscious work and corporate cultures, whether it be a smaller company. I'm not talking about the onesies, but the smaller companies that have about 5 to 30 employees, just like as you said yourself, right? Because those are very powerful and unique organizations. They're huge drivers of our economy, and they can be extremely fun and extremely a great place to work if the culture is right, or they can be extremely toxic, especially when I think about companies that are family-owned companies.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so you're envisioning a way to impact them to a greater extent.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any offers or opportunities that are coming up within? I mean, you mentioned that you're full right now, but is there anything that if somebody's contemplating how to work with you that they should be considering? Any activities?
Well, in terms of their activities, whatever they, I would definitely encourage them just commit themselves to lifelong learning, because no matter where you are in your stage of your career, your work, your business, if it's not a lifelong commitment to learning, you're going to be left behind. Number one. Number two, the special offer I have right now is when you contact me and you mention your podcast, I will definitely give a 20% off of a 12-month contract, 10% off of a 6-month contract.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. So that's the way you work, 6 months and 12 months, which makes sense. Similar to what I do, right? We tell people to think of this as a year more experience, because you're not going to fix it in 2-3 months, right?
No.
It takes time. And I agree with the lifelong learning. When I look at my career advancement, the pace of my career advancement, now some of this is inevitable. I was reading every day. I was on planes. I wasn't allowed to have an electronic device. I read. Around the same time, right? Finished my MBA. My kids were born, became a dad, all those other things. Still advanced, but not at the same pace, because if I look back on it, I wasn't learning because I was being a dad. I'm still being a dad, but it just changes. And then the last couple of years, it's been read, and the way you look at things changes. The more you read, no matter what you're reading, you will see things differently regularly, and you'll get motivated and inspired.
Yes, and to try to definitely stay through that. It's interesting when you're asking me my typical client. A lot of them, there's a group that's around the ages of 40-ish, 45, 50 at the max, where they're going through midlife, and it causes people to really reconsider, right?
Mm-hmm.
And talk about confusion and all that. And that's another time in their life where all of this fits into place. How do all these different aspects of our life come back into some semblance of balance? Because as a young father, once you had those kids, you're concerned about bringing home the bacon, taking care of the logistics at home, right? And there's not much room for anything else. And you wake up about 10, 15 years later, say, where am I going? What is this all about? Oh my God, I'm so burned out.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than have that, I would definitely encourage people to find a coach.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, but you do. There's a lot of people I know that could benefit from you, and there's some people I know are going to go, I wish I had talked to him a while ago. Literally, when I made my change a couple of years ago, right, I was in that person you described, right? And there was one person I talked to, and he's like, man, I admire that, but I'm so close to the finish line. I'm just going to ride it out, which happens to many people.
No,
right?
Wait a minute. How's this finish line defined? At 45?
Well, when he has enough to retire. Yeah, at 60, right? That type of, I can retire.
That's a lot of years. That's a lot of years.
I'm just telling you, there's a lot of people that do that, right? And to your point, they can still make change.
Yeah. Right. A lot of years to work with a deadened heart and just go through the motions.
Yeah, well, it's good that you're out there, and I'm glad we met. I'll get this out there soon. What's your website real quick? I know you're going to give it to me offline, but what's your website?
It's easy, just edcaldwell.com. That's
Excellent.
EDCALDWELL.com.
All right, cool. Well, it was great talking with you. Is there anything else you want to share before I get off?
No, nothing else comes to mind. I really thank you for the opportunity. It's really been a lot of fun.
No, it's been great. I've enjoyed talking to you, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.